Pro-democracy protests have continued in Egypt, and demonstrations have been held outside the parliament in Cairo. Mass strikes have also been taking place across the country. All this as negotiators meet to discuss the future transition of power. A no-show by the former president of Liberia at his war crimes trial today. More on that from Felicity Barr in London. Felicity.
That's right, Adrian. The defence for the former Liberian President Charles Taylor has accused judges in the case of putting their egos before justice. Well, Taylor, of course, is the first former African ruler to stand trial for war crimes. He's pleaded not guilty to 11 charges, including murder, rape and conscripting child soldiers. Taylor and his lawyer have boycotted the closing stages of the trial because judges rejected their written summary of the case, which had been filed late. Now, the mobile phone giant Nokia is standing on a burning platform surrounded by a blazing fire of competition. At least that is according to an internal memo from its new boss. Stephen Ellop's message hits out at his company for lacking competitiveness and accountability, as well as what he calls a general series of misses. The Finnish company has been struggling to cope in the recent mobile phone market. Worldwide sales fell from 36% of market share to 29% in 2009. And Mr. Ellop pulled no punches in his analysis of the company's predicament. We fell behind, we missed big trends and we lost time, he wrote. At that time, we thought we were making the right decisions, but with the benefit of hindsight, we now find ourselves years behind. Well, Matthew Barth, the technology editor at the consumer magazine Which, says Nokia's competition has played a far smarter game.
They're in a race against Google with its Android platform, against Apple, which has only been in the market a couple of years, and against RIM, Research in Motion, with its BlackBerry. Now, really, Nokia, which is still the world's largest handset maker, has really found itself struggling against these newcomers, and certainly in the crucial smartphone space. All these other companies have posted massive growth, whereas Nokia's actually seen its market share fall.
Now, take a look at this aircraft. It is the F-117 Nighthawk. It was one of the United States military's most sophisticated aircraft, thanks to its stealth technology. But could the know-how used to build this warplane have helped to develop China's new stealth fighter, known as the JXX? Well, the answer may come from the only place that a stealth bomber has been shot from the sky, in Serbia. Barnaby Phillips explains.
It's a bleak place, but history was made here. It was 1999, Yugoslavia under attack from NATO, when Zoltan Dani became the only person to have ever shot down a stealth bomber plane. His missile hit it in the sky, and it came down in these fields. It was an American F-117, the pride of their air force. Excited villagers could scarcely believe it. For Serbia, a moment of triumph amidst years of humiliation and retreat. Zoltan had used radar to see a plane designed to be invisible. Afterwards, he says, 3 countries offered money for his expertise. 2 from the Middle East, and a third, which he would not name, but which he describes as a rising power. Fast forward to today, and pictures emerge of China's stealth fighter plane, a breakthrough that has taken the world by surprise, and led many to ask, how did China do it?
Most of the remains of the American plane are on display here at Belgrade's Aviation Museum. Now, the Chinese deny any link between their plane and the American one. Rather, they say they've developed a new stealth fighter using indigenous, entirely Chinese technology.
We met a farmer who lives near where the American plane was shot down. Like many here, he recalls how that event, briefly, transformed lives in a traditional rural community.
We found parts of the plane in the fields. Then the Chinese came here and offered us gifts and sometimes money in return for those parts. They were asking everyone. They came to my house. I gave them part of the plane. I had no use for it.
So, assuming the Chinese did get pieces of the American plane, would that have helped them to build their own very different-looking model?
Anyone who had access to the surface of the aircraft could learn about the special coating that makes it almost invisible to radar. So if they had parts of the F-117, that would have been a big advantage to developing their own stealth aircraft.
It's an intriguing story, and we'll probably never know the whole truth. Whether the Chinese really did rely on help from a small Serbian village to build a very modern plane. Barnaby Phillips, Al Jazeera in northern Serbia.
To France now, where President Nicolas Sarkozy has banned members of his cabinet from holidaying abroad. It follows revelations that both his Prime Minister and Foreign Minister went on free holidays in crisis-hit North African countries. One trip included a plane that was loaned by Egypt's Hosni Mubarak. Rory Challens reports.
Prime Minister François Fillon would probably like to escape France at the moment. So too would Foreign Minister Michel Alliot-Marie. The problem is that's exactly what's got them both into trouble. Monsieur Fillon took his family on holiday to the Nile resort of Aswan, courtesy of Egypt's unpopular President Hosni Mubarak. And Madame Alliot-Marie is facing calls to resign for flying on a private plane to Tunisia for holidays. That plane owned by a businessman with alleged ties to ousted leader Ben Ali. With pictures like these coming daily from the Middle East, it was very bad timing for the politicians. The French media has had a field day, painting the two as cozying up to despots and autocrats.
How comes that the French foreign minister and the French prime minister were going to these countries at this very moment when, in the case of Tunisia, the repression and the revolt had already started, and at a time when one could imagine that the French diplomacy was aware that there was a risk of contagion.
But the Prime Minister insists he's done nothing wrong.
I have strictly respected all the rules related to private trips abroad for the Prime Minister, as well as the President of the Republic.
But even if no rules were broken, President Sarkozy knows this looks bad, and new guidelines have been issued.
For the holidays, from now on, members of the government will have to prioritise France. Invitations abroad will be authorised by the Prime Minister, in agreement with the diplomatic sections of the French presidency.
Some, though, might question the wisdom of putting the Prime Minister, one of the culprits here, in charge of preventing any further embarrassments. Rory Challens, Al Jazeera.
Now, US President Barack Obama is gearing up to send Congress his budget request for 2012. Back to Rosalind in Washington for more on that. Rosalind.
Thanks so much, Felicity. The Obama administration is wrestling with record budget deficits as well as a limping economy. On Wednesday, the head of the U.S. Federal Reserve, Ben Bernanke, warned Congress that current job growth is not enough for a sustained recovery. John Terrett reports.
Mid-February and Time Washington focused on the 2012 budget. President Obama is going to send his spending request to Congress next week, hoping to appease Republicans seeking cuts with programs to boost the economy. On Wednesday, the head of the central bank, Ben Bernanke, testified before the newly Republican-controlled House Budget Committee about the state of the U.S. economy and the country's debt. He said there may be signs of optimism, but a lack of jobs growth is still a big problem.
Until we see a sustained period of stronger job creation, we cannot consider the recovery to be truly established.
The lack of jobs is hurting the president's approval ratings. A new poll shows President Obama gets low marks from Americans for the way he's dealing with the economy. The Gallup survey shows only 37% approve, while a whopping 60% disapprove. Global economic woes have their roots in the U.S. housing market, and bailing out two giants of the industry, Fannie Mae and Freddie Mac, cost U.S. taxpayers billions of dollars. As the 2012 budget details begin to leak, it's clear the Obama administration is set on cutting them loose so that never again will the government have to step in, as it did in the aftermath of the collapse in 2008-2009. Also on the budget radar, plans to help cash-strapped U.S. states that have borrowed billions of dollars from the federal government to cover soaring unemployment benefits. The idea is to freeze their interest rate payments for 2 years. But Republicans see this as a massive spend when what they want is deeper government cuts. Late Wednesday, plans to slash more than 60 government programs from health, education, transportation and law enforcement began to come out.
Clearly our number one issue is getting the economy going again and getting people back to work. And we believe that in order for that to happen, that we need to cut spending. We need to stop unnecessary regulation that's hampering small businesses' ability to hire people.
President Obama may send his budget to the Congress next week, but as usual in the U.S. system, arguing over its finer points may take more than a year. John Terrett, Al Jazeera, Washington.
A little more than a month after she was shot in the head at point-blank range, a U.S. Congresswoman is beginning to regain her speech. Doctors in Houston say Gabrielle Giffords is now speaking, quote, more and more. The Congresswoman was alert on Monday morning, even requesting a change to her breakfast. Giffords is recovering at a rehabilitation center after she was shot during a mass killing in her hometown of Tucson, Arizona, in early January. A year after a human rights activist was killed along the Mexico-Texas border, authorities say that they're now looking into the disappearance of 3 of the activist's relatives. Mexican police say that they've received a complaint that the relatives of Josefina Reyes were forced from their car on Monday near Ciudad Juarez. That's just across the border from El Paso, Texas. Reyes had led protests against alleged abuses committed by Mexican soldiers before her death. A U.S. judge has rejected a defense motion to delay the testimony of 2 Cuban officials in the perjury trial of an ex-CIA agent. A Cuban Interior Ministry investigator has been testifying in the trial of 82-year-old Luis Posada Carriles. The judge has let him testify about a 1997 Havana hotel bombing that prosecutors say Posada planned. Prosecutors also accuse the Cuban-born Posada of lying, both about how he came to the U.S. in 2005 and about his role in the Havana attacks. Meantime, Cuban Americans are assessing the potential impact of a new White House policy on relations with their homeland. The Obama administration has eased travel restrictions and increased the amount of money Americans can send to their relatives in Cuba. But not everyone welcomes the changes, as we hear from Kimberly Halkett in Miami.
Okay, it's coming up.
For Domingo Amarshastegui, preparing Cuban coffee is a daily ritual. But he says it's bittersweet, much like his memories of living in Cuba under the United States economic embargo. The U.S. put commercial limits on Cuba when Domingo was just a young man to push it towards democracy. After 50 years of waiting, Domingo says President Obama's recent relaxing of some restrictions is just a rehashing of a